the way that the Chinese see the world is different. And I mean that literally. If you do a search in Google for map of the world in English, you get maps that look like this. But if you do a search in a Chinese search engine like Baidu.com and you search for map of the world in Chinese, 世界地图, then it looks totally different. So, how are they different and why are they so different? So this is a map of the world in English, and what you notice is that the Americas are on the left-hand side of the map. Compare that to a Chinese world map, and you can see it is totally different, with the Americas off to the right-hand side, with Asia, including China, closer to the middle. Now, this obviously makes sense from a Chinese perspective, because you're able to see where the Americas are in relation to China. Whereas in the English map of the world, you can't see how far away the Americas are, and you can't see how big the Pacific Ocean is. This also makes sense to the Chinese because of how you say China in Chinese. China in Chinese is 中国. 中 means middle, and 国 means country, or kingdom, or state. So China in Chinese is literally the middle kingdom, or the middle country. So from their perspective, or at least in ancient times, they saw themselves at the center of the world. So, the important question is, why? Why is the Chinese world map so different? Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking the answer is obvious. They've moved China closer to the center because it represents a very Chinese-centric worldview. But here's the thing, the decision to make the map this way wasn't actually made by a Chinese person. And to understand that, we need to go back more than 400 years. This is a very important map. This is the Kunyu Wanguo Chuantu, which means the complete map of 10,000 countries. This particular map is a Japanese copy which was made in 1604. The original was made in 1602. I'm showing you this one because it's just a bit easier to read, it's much better preserved, there's a lot more color, it's easier to make out the characters. What's really important about this map is that it's the first Chinese map to show the Americas, here on the right-hand side. Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, but it wasn't until this map was made, over 100 years later, that the Chinese learnt about the Americas. This map was created by Matteo Ricci, an Italian Jesuit priest who lived in China between 1583 and 1610. Matteo Ricci went to China with the aim of converting the population to Christianity. And while he was there, he became something of a celebrity, and he impressed a lot of people, particularly with his ability to predict solar eclipses with incredible accuracy. And the emperor at the time, the Wanli emperor, commissioned Matteo Ricci to create this map. Ricci worked very closely with a team of Chinese scholars who helped with the map, particularly with a lot of the Chinese writings. But they also provided a lot of knowledge that they knew about Asian geography and Chinese geography. What's crucial here is that instead of putting the Americas on the left-hand side of the map, which was custom at the time, Ricci made the deliberate choice to put the Americas on the right-hand side of the map, putting China closer to the center. Now, this was a deliberate decision by Ricci. Matteo Ricci could read and write Chinese, and he would well have known what China means in Chinese, and that it means the Middle Kingdom. So he was trying to see it from their point of view. He was taking a different perspective. He was trying to look at the world through Chinese eyes. And this way of depicting the world, with the Americas on the right, China closer to the center, has stuck with Chinese maps of the world ever since, going right up to the map of the world that we see today. Ricci lived in China for 28 years. And in 1601, he was given permission to move to Beijing.
So I'm here in Beijing. It's a very sunny day, but it is a winter's day, so don't let the sun fool you. It is actually very cold and very windy. I know Beijing has a bit of a bad reputation for the air, but look at that blue sky, absolutely gorgeous. So I'm at the Forbidden City. It's officially renamed the Palace Museum. When you look around and you see how many tourists there are, you can see that forbidden it is not. But back in Matteo Ricci's day, it very much was. It wasn't as accessible as it is today. And in 1601, Matteo Ricci was invited by the Wanli Emperor to come into the Forbidden City and have a meeting with the Emperor himself. At the time, Ricci's main aim was to convert the Chinese population to Christianity. The Jesuit priests at the time were taking a top-down approach. They believed that if they could convert the Chinese emperor to Christianity, then the population would also convert. So a meeting with the Wanli Emperor is exactly what he wanted, but unfortunately for him, the Wanli Emperor seemed to have changed his mind and they didn't meet. The Wanli Emperor has something of a bad reputation. He was considered to be not one of China's best emperors. He very often cancelled meetings with his officials. He was known to be somewhat negligent in his duties, so cancelling a meeting with Ricci last minute sounds pretty characteristic of the Wanli Emperor. But Matteo Ricci did enter the Forbidden City, which was a very important event because he was the first ever European, first ever Westerner to enter the Forbidden City. So it marks a very important event in East meets West relations. So I'm standing just outside the cemetery of Matteo Ricci. He died in Beijing in 1610, and at the time it was custom for foreigners to be buried in Macau. But because he had such a huge impact on Beijing at the time and he was so well known, an exception was made for him. So he was the first Westerner to be allowed to be buried in the mainland of China. So what they did is they found a Buddhist temple on a plot of land and they allocated it to become a graveyard. So Matteo Ricci was the first person to be buried there. So he's buried here in this graveyard behind me. And many other foreigners later also were buried here. Matteo Ricci left a very lasting legacy. But the biggest legacy is that he taught us the value of looking at the world through others' eyes and trying to see the world through a different perspective.
Now, this is a picture of the original map that was commissioned by the Wanli Emperor in 1602. The original was quite large, at 5 feet tall, carved onto 6 wood blocks, and somehow it found its way to America, and right now it can be found at the University of Minnesota. This map means so much more than the knowledge that it taught, like the existence and location of the Americas. It represents one of the most important encounters between East and West, where a group of Chinese and Western scholars came together to produce something greater than it could on their own. It also reminds us the importance of taking a different perspective and trying to see the world through another's eyes.